The evening air carried a hint of autumn as Lily Harris hurried through the back entrance of the Bellamy restaurant. She was running 5 minutes late for her shift, something that had never happened in her 3 years of working at the upscale establishment. The bus had been delayed, and despite leaving her small apartment with plenty of time to spare, here she was, rushing to tie her apron while mentally preparing for her manager's disapproving glance. "Sorry I'm late." "Mike," she called out as she passed the kitchen. "Bus trouble." Mike, a balding man in his 50s with kind eyes that contrasted his strict demeanor, simply nodded. "Better get moving. We've got the Reed party tonight in the private dining room." Lily's stomach tightened. Everyone at the Bellamy knew about Maxwell Reed, the real estate tycoon whose net worth had recently crossed into billionaire territory according to the business magazines. His reputation preceded him, demanding, particular, and not afraid to make his displeasure known. The private dining room had been booked for weeks and the chef had been stressing over the menu for days. "How many in his party?" Lily asked, quickly checking her appearance in the reflection of a polished serving tray. 22, Mike replied. "And you're on that section with Tony and Rebecca." Lily nodded, grateful she wouldn't be handling the pressure alone. As she filled water pitchers, her mind drifted to the stack of bills waiting on her kitchen counter at home. The student loans that had financed her music degree at the state university. The mounting medical expenses for her grandmother's care at the assisted living facility. The rent increase notification that had arrived last week. At 26, this wasn't where Lily had imagined she would be. In her dreams, she had seen concert halls and grand pianos, not reservation books and wine lists. But life had a way of rewriting dreams, didn't it? "They're here," Rebecca announced, peering through the kitchen doors. "And he brought more people than expected." Mike sighed heavily. Of course he did. "Lily, grab another place setting." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Lily moved efficiently between tables, her years of practice evident in the way she balanced multiple plates along her arm and remembered every specific request without writing it down. The private room hummed with conversation and occasional bursts of laughter that seemed more calculated than genuine. Business people trying to impress other business people. Maxwell Reed sat at the head of the table. A man in his early 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and a tailored suit that probably cost more than Lily's monthly rent. He spoke with authority, rarely smiling, his eyes constantly evaluating everyone around him. "We need another bottle of the Bordeaux," Tony whispered to Lily as they crossed paths near the kitchen. "Table's going through wine like it's water." "I'll grab it," Lily offered, slipping into the wine cellar where the temperature was carefully controlled. As she searched for the right bottle, her fingers absently tapped a rhythm on the shelf edge. Chopin's Nocturne Op. 9, the piece she had played at her last recital before real life had intervened. When was the last time she had touched a piano? Nearly 2 years now. Her grandmother had insisted she keep the old upright piano that had been in the family for generations, even when they downsized to the smaller apartment. "Music is in your blood," she had said. "You can't just cut it out." But the piano sat mostly untouched, except for those rare evenings when Lily's longing overcame her exhaustion. Returning to the dining room with the wine, Lily noticed a piano in the corner. The Bellamy occasionally featured live music, and tonight they had hired a pianist, a thin, nervous-looking man who played background classics that nobody really listened to. Right now, he was working his way through a Gershwin piece, his performance technically correct but somehow lifeless. As Lily poured wine for a guest, she noticed Reed glancing repeatedly at the pianist, his expression growing increasingly irritated. She had seen that look before on other wealthy patrons. The look that said the service, no matter how excellent, wasn't meeting their impossible standards. "Is everything to your satisfaction, sir?" she asked another guest, a woman in an elegant blue dress who had barely touched her entree. "Yes, it's lovely," the woman replied, though her attention was clearly focused on Reed rather than her meal. As the evening progressed, Lily noticed the increasing tension around the table. Reed was hosting potential investors for his newest development project, a luxury high-rise that promised to revolutionize urban living, according to the snippets of conversation she overheard. The stakes were high, and Reed seemed determined to impress. During dessert, Lily overheard a conversation that made her pause as she collected empty plates. "The art center in the development is just for show," a man was saying quietly to his companion. "Reed doesn't care about music or art. It's just a tax write-off and a selling point for the penthouses. Of course, the other replied with a knowing smirk. When was the last time you saw him at the symphony? The man wouldn't know Mozart from Metallica. Lily moved away, her face carefully neutral even as the words stung slightly. She had seen this attitude before. People who viewed art as nothing more than a status symbol, something to display rather than experience. It was part of why she had become so disillusioned with the music world, where talent often mattered less than connections and image. The pianist had moved on to a Mozart piece now, his playing correct but mechanical. Lily noticed Reed's expression darkening as he glanced toward the piano. Something was building there, a storm-gathering force in the kitchen. The staff could sense it too. "Reed's in a mood," Tony muttered as they prepared the coffee service. "He keeps glaring at that poor pianist like he wants to fire him on the spot." "Let's just get through dessert without any drama," Rebecca said, arranging delicate chocolate confections on small plates. Lily nodded in agreement, but a knot was forming in her stomach. She had witnessed enough wealthy customer meltdowns to recognize the warning signs. When she returned to the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted. Reed was now openly watching the pianist, his conversation with guests becoming more distracted and curt. The musician, sensing the scrutiny, was visibly nervous, his playing becoming more stilted with each passing minute. "Is there a problem with the music, Mr. Reed?" Mike had appeared, ever vigilant about customer satisfaction. "You call that music?" Reed replied, not bothering to lower his voice. "I've heard shopping mall entertainers with more passion." The room grew uncomfortable. The pianist's hands faltered on the keys. "We can certainly ask him to play something different," Mike suggested smoothly. "Different won't fix mediocre," Reed said dismissively. "This is supposed to be one of the finest restaurants in the city. I expected better." Lily kept her head down, continuing to serve coffee as if nothing were happening, though every server in the room was exchanging glances. They had all dealt with difficult customers before, but public humiliation of another worker was particularly hard to watch. The pianist, red-faced now, attempted to recover with a more complex piece, but his embarrassment made his playing even more mechanical. "Enough," Reed finally said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're ruining the ambiance. We'll do without music for the rest of the evening." Mike quickly intervened, whispered something to the pianist, who gathered his sheet music with shaking hands and left the room. The silence that followed was heavy and awkward. Lily felt a flash of anger as she watched the musicians retreating back. She knew exactly how it felt to have your art dismissed, to have years of practice and passion reduced to someone else's casual judgment. She had experienced similar moments during her brief attempt at a professional music career, wealthy patrons or sponsors whose support came with impossible expectations and cutting critiques. As she refilled water glasses, Lily caught a glimpse of the abandoned piano, its lid still raised like an invitation. Her fingers tingled with muscle memory. Despite everything, despite the practical decision to set aside her dreams for the stability of a regular paycheck, music still lived inside her, dormant but not dead. The dinner continued, the conversation gradually recovering from the uncomfortable incident. Reed seemed to have forgotten about it entirely, now engaged in an animated discussion about property values with potential investors. Lily moved efficiently around the table, invisible as servers often were to people who saw them as functions rather than humans. Little did she know that in less than 30 minutes, everything would change. The paths of the wealthy businessman and the struggling waitress were about to cross in ways neither could have anticipated. The piano sitting silent in the corner would soon become the centerpiece of an evening that would be remembered long after the expensive wine and gourmet food were forgotten. For now, though Lily continued her work, unaware that her hidden talent was about to be exposed in the most unexpected and public way possible. The evening shifted into its second hour as Lily balanced a tray of desserts in one hand and fresh coffee in the other. The mood in the private dining room had recovered somewhat after the pianist's departure, but something still felt off. Maxwell Reed's dinner party had grown louder with each round of drinks, the conversation more animated yet somehow less genuine. Money talked at this table, loudly, but it rarely said anything meaningful. Lily slid the chocolate torte in front of a woman dripping in diamonds, careful not to disrupt the delicate raspberry garnish. The woman didn't even look up, too engrossed in whatever Reed was saying about property values downtown. 3 years at the Bellamy had taught Lily the art of invisibility. Good service meant anticipating needs without being noticed, like a ghost who refilled water glasses and cleared away plates. The problem with this city, Reed was saying, his voice carrying above all others, is its lack of vision. Old buildings taking up prime real estate. People clinging to the past when they should embrace progress. A few heads nodded eagerly around the table. These were people who stood to make money from Reed's latest development project, a luxury high-rise that would replace several historic buildings downtown. Lily had read about the controversy in the local paper. The old theater and surrounding shops had been there for generations, but they couldn't compete with the promise of penthouses and profit. "We're ready for the Grand Marnier soufflés," Mike announced, popping his head into the kitchen where Lily had gone to grab fresh napkins. "And Reed is asking for that pianist to come back." Lily raised her eyebrows. "I thought he hated the music." "Apparently now he wants entertainment for his big announcement. I've called the pianist, but he's already halfway home and—" Mike hesitated. "He's not eager to return after how he was treated." "Can't blame him," Lily muttered. "Just serve the soufflés and keep smiling," Mike said, his forehead creased with worry. "I'll figure something out." When Lily returned to the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted again. Reed was standing now, champagne glass in hand, clearly preparing for some kind of toast. Behind him, the piano sat silent and empty, a reminder of his earlier display of power. "Before we move to final discussions," Reed announced, "I'd like to share the full vision for the Pinnacle." He gestured to an assistant who began distributing glossy folders to everyone at the table. "These renderings show not just the luxury residences, but the complete lifestyle experience we're creating." Lily moved around the edge of the room, refilling coffee cups and clearing dessert plates with practiced efficiency. From the corner of her eye, she caught glimpses of the brochures, images of sleek towers with gleaming glass walls, rooftop gardens, and what looked like an elegant concert hall. "The Pinnacle Cultural Center will be the crown jewel," Reed continued proudly. "A venue for the finest musicians and artists, elevating our city's cultural landscape to rival New York or Chicago." The word struck Lily as oddly hollow, coming from a man who, less than an hour ago, had humiliated a musician simply for not meeting his arbitrary standards. She wondered if any of his guests noticed the contradiction. "Speaking of culture," Reed said, his voice taking on a theatrical quality, "I had hoped for some appropriate background music for this moment." His eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on Mike, who stood nervously by the kitchen door. "Where has our pianist gone?" "I apologize, Mr. Reed," Mike said, stepping forward with a professional smile that didn't reach his eyes. "He had another engagement this evening." Reed's expression darkened. "Another engagement? When I specifically requested music for the entire evening?" The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Lily kept her head down, focusing intently on arranging coffee cups just so, wishing she could disappear entirely. "Perhaps one of your staff can fill in," Reed suggested, his tone making it clear this wasn't really a question. "Surely someone here knows how to play a simple tune." Mike's smile became more strained. "I'm afraid none of our staff tonight are musicians, sir." Reed looked around the room, his gaze calculating. "Are you certain? I find that hard to believe." His eyes settled on Tony, who was serving wine at the far end of the table. "You there? Any hidden talents?" Tony shook his head quickly. "No, sir. Can't play a note." Reed's attention continued around the room like a spotlight, making each server tense as it passed over them. When it reached Lily, she kept her eyes fixed on the coffee pot in her hands. Too late. She felt rather than saw his focus sharpen on her. "What about you?" Reed asked, pointing directly at Lily. "You look like you might have some artistic ability." The room fell silent. Every head turned toward her, 20-some pairs of eyes filled with curiosity or worse, amusement. They were ready for entertainment, and apparently she was it. Lily began, unsure how to respond. The truth hovered on her lips, but years of customer service training held it back. "Never contradict. Always accommodate. Come now, don't be shy," Reed insisted, gesturing toward the piano. "We're all friends here. Friends, right? Friends who watched as he berated the professional pianist earlier. Friends who now expected her to either embarrass herself or reveal a part of herself she had carefully kept hidden at work." Lily glanced at Mike, hoping for rescue, but saw only apology in his eyes mixed with silent pleading. The Bellamy couldn't afford to offend Reed. His business meant too much to their bottom line, and everyone's jobs depended on that bottom line, including hers. "Mr. Reed," Mike began carefully, "perhaps we could stream some music through our sound system instead." "Nonsense," Reed waved away the suggestion. "Nothing compares to live performance. That's why the Pinnacle's Cultural Center will feature only the finest live musicians." He turned back to Lily. "Well, are you going to keep us waiting all night?" The trap was complete. Refuse, and she risked her job. Comply, and she risked exposing the very part of herself she had worked so hard to bury. Lily set down her coffee pot with careful precision. "I can play a little," she admitted quietly. A murmur went around the table. Reed looked triumphant. "Wonderful. You see, Mike, hidden talent right under your nose." As Lily made her way to the piano, her legs felt strangely detached from her body. The short walk across the dining room stretched into infinity. She was acutely aware of every eye following her movement, every whispered comment, every suppressed laugh. The piano bench was still warm from the previous player. Lily sat down, staring at the black and white keys that had once been as familiar to her as her own hands. Now they seemed foreign, intimidating. 2 years was a long time to go without practice. What if her fingers had forgotten? What if the music had left her completely? "Don't worry about being nervous," Reed called out, his voice dripping with condescension. "We have fairly low expectations for server talent." A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through his guests. Lily's cheeks burned. In that moment, something hardened inside her. This man knew nothing about her, about the years of lessons, the competitions, the scholarships, about the dreams she had set aside not because of lack of talent, but because life had demanded different choices. She placed her hands on the keys, surprised by how naturally they found their position. Muscle memory was a powerful thing. For a brief moment she closed her eyes, shutting out the watchful crowd. What should she play? Something simple would be safer. Less chance of mistakes, less chance of revealing too much. A basic tune, pleasant enough to satisfy Reed's demand but not so complex that it would raise questions about where a waitress had learned to play like that. Her fingers hovered uncertainly. Behind her she heard Reed clear his throat impatiently. "Any day now," he said, drawing another round of laughter from his guests. That did it. The indecision vanished. If he wanted a performance, she would give him one. Not for his entertainment, but for herself. For the part of her that had been silenced for too long. Lily opened her eyes and straightened her back, her hands poised above the keys, trembling slightly. Not from fear now, but from anticipation. The dining room seemed to hold its collective breath. In this suspended moment, Lily realized something important. Whether she played poorly or brilliantly, something would change tonight. A door long closed would crack open again. What lay beyond it was impossible to know. But there was no turning back now. The first notes hung in the air, soft but clear, like raindrops at the beginning of a storm. What came next would leave everyone in that room speechless, but for now, this single moment of anticipation stretched between her past and her future, a tightrope of possibility. Lily's fingers hovered above the piano keys, the weight of everyone's stares pressing down on her shoulders. The dining room had fallen into an expectant hush, punctuated only by the occasional clink of silverware or the soft rustle of expensive clothing. She glanced up briefly, catching Mike's worried expression by the kitchen door, Tony's sympathetic grimace as he refilled water glasses, and Maxwell Reed's smug smile as he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. 23 months. That's how long it had been since she had really played. Sure, there had been those few nights when loneliness or nostalgia had driven her to the old upright piano in her apartment. Brief moments when her fingers had skimmed the keys before reality came crashing back. But truly playing, losing herself in the music? 23 months. Lily took a deep breath and placed her hands properly on the keys. The familiar position sent a jolt through her body, like greeting an old friend after a long absence. Her mind raced, scrambling to remember what she could play safely, something simple that wouldn't reveal too much about her past. "We're waiting," Reed called out, his voice heavy with amusement. "Don't tell me our waitress has stage fright." A few awkward chuckles rippled through the crowd. Lily felt heat rising to her cheeks again, but this time it wasn't just embarrassment, it was something closer to anger. the same anger she'd felt watching the hired pianist being humiliated earlier. As her fingers pressed down on the first tentative chords, memories washed over her in waves. The small wooden piano in her grandmother's house where she had first learned to play at age 6. The upright in the music room at school, where her teacher had first noticed her unusual talent. The grand piano at the university, where she had spent countless hours practicing until her fingers cramped and her back ached. The notes came out hesitantly at first. A simple melody, something that any moderately skilled amateur might manage. Für Elise, the piece everyone learned. Safe, expected. She could feel Reed and his guests relaxing, their initial curiosity fading as she delivered exactly what they had anticipated. A waitress with a bit of piano training, nothing special, just enough to provide background music while they returned to their important conversations. That's what they wanted. What would make this moment pass quickly and allow her to slip back into invisibility? Play something simple, get it over with, return to being just another server. But as her fingers moved automatically through the familiar piece, Lily's mind drifted back to the last time she had performed publicly. The university recital hall, filled with fellow students and faculty. The competition that could have changed everything. The prestigious fellowship that would have funded her final year of study and opened doors to graduate programs. Across the country, she had chosen Chopin for that performance. Nocturne in E-flat major, Opera 9, No. 2. The piece that had first made her fall in love with classical piano as a child. She had played it perfectly that night. Every note infused with emotion, every phrase shaped with care. The judges had been impressed. The fellowship had been within reach. Then came the call from her grandmother's neighbor. The fall, the hospital, the diagnosis that changed everything. Is that all you know? Reed's voice cut through her memories, jarring her back to the present. I was hoping for something a bit more impressive. Lily's hands faltered on the keys. She looked up to find Reed watching her with barely disguised boredom, already turning back to his guests as if dismissing her. Something shifted inside her then. A dam breaking. A door unlocking. Who was this man to judge her? To assume he knew anything about her capabilities based on her uniform, her job, her circumstance? The same man who talked about building cultural centers while treating actual artists with contempt. Her hands lifted from the keys briefly, hovering in that moment of decision. Play it safe and retreat, or show him, what music really meant. Lily closed her eyes and placed her hands back on the keyboard. This time, when her fingers touched the keys, they found different notes. The opening bars of Chopin's Nocturne filled the room, soft and delicate at first, like the beginning of rainfall. The piece she had played at her last recital. The piece that reminded her of everything she had once hoped to become. The conversation at the table faltered. A few heads turned in surprise. Lily kept her eyes closed, letting muscle memory guide her through the familiar territory. The gentle left-hand arpeggios supporting the soulful melody in the right. The distinctive rhythm that made this piece instantly recognizable to anyone with even a passing knowledge of classical music. As she played, the restaurant around her began to fade. The weight of the past 2 years, the grueling double shifts, the mounting bills, the apartment that never quite felt like home, the piano that had sat mostly untouched, all of it seemed to lift from her shoulders with each phrase. Her grandmother had always told her that music was a language of its own. When words fail, the piano speaks, she would say, guiding Lily's small hands over the keys. Even now, battling dementia in the care facility across town, there were moments when her grandmother would hear music and briefly return to herself, eyes lighting up with recognition. The nocturne flowed from Lily's fingers with increasing confidence, the initial tentative quality giving way to assured expressivity. This wasn't just playing notes on a page. This was speaking that wordless language, saying everything she had kept bottled up for nearly 2 years, her frustration at having to abandon her degree with just 1 semester remaining. The guilt she felt every time she visited her grandmother, who constantly asked when Lily would play her next concert, unable to understand why those dreams had been set aside. The bone-deep weariness from working multiple jobs to keep up with the care facility payments. The loneliness of having drifted away from her music school friends, unable to bear their well-intentioned questions about when she'd return to finish her studies. All of it poured through her fingers and into the piano. The dining room had gone completely silent now. Lily barely noticed, lost in the familiar terrain of Chopin's masterpiece, navigating its emotional landscape like returning to a beloved childhood home. As she approached the middle section, where the piece grew more complex, a flicker of doubt tried to surface. It had been so long. What if her technique had deteriorated too much? What if she stumbled on the ornamentations, the delicate runs, the subtle tempo changes that made this piece so challenging, despite its apparent simplicity? But her fingers remembered what her conscious mind doubted. They moved across the keys with precision and grace, finding each note exactly where it should be. Years of practice had embedded this music not just in her memory but in her very muscles and bones. When Lily finally opened her eyes, she was startled to find every person in the room watching her. Servers had paused in their duties. Kitchen staff had appeared at the doorway. Reed's guests had abandoned their conversations, desserts sitting forgotten before them, and Reed himself was staring at her, his expression unreadable. The smug smile was gone, replaced by something Lily couldn't quite identify. Surprise, certainly, but also something else. Something almost like discomfort. Good. Let him be uncomfortable. Let him wonder what else he might have missed or misjudged about the people he encountered every day. The people he passed without seeing. The people who served his food and poured his wine and endured his moods. As she played the final section of the nocturne, bringing the piece full circle with its return to the opening theme, Lily made a decision. This wouldn't be a one-time performance, a party trick to entertain wealthy diners. This moment, uncomfortable as it had begun, was a reminder of something essential she had nearly forgotten about herself. The music inside her had never truly gone silent. It had only been waiting, patient and persistent, for her to find her way back. The final notes of the nocturne lingered in the air, sweet and melancholy. For a moment no one moved or spoke. The silence that followed her performance felt almost sacred, a collective held breath. Then, just as the spell was about to break, Lily's hands returned to the keys. Instead of rising from the bench and retreating back to her role as server, she began to play again. This time she chose something entirely different. The opening of Franz Liszt's La Campanella, one of the most technically demanding pieces in the piano repertoire. The rapid, bell-like notes cascaded through the room like a shower of stars. This wasn't just playing anymore. This was a statement, a revelation, a reclaiming of something precious she had thought lost. Lily didn't look at Reed or his guests as her hands flew across the keyboard, tackling the notorious jumps and trills that made this piece a benchmark for pianists worldwide. She didn't need to. She could feel the shift in the room, the shock, the disbelief, and finally, the dawning recognition that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Whatever happened after tonight, whether she kept her job or lost it, whether this changed everything or nothing, at least she had remembered who she really was. Not just Lily the waitress, but Lily the pianist, Lily the musician, and no one, not even Maxwell Reed with all his wealth and power, could take that away from her again. The first 30 seconds of La Campanella were enough to transform the atmosphere in the private dining room. The lightning-quick notes sparkled through the air like tiny bells, which was exactly what the title meant in Italian. Lily's fingers moved with such speed and precision that several guests leaned forward in their chairs, abandoning all pretense of disinterest. Maxwell Reed's face had lost its smugness entirely. He sat perfectly still, wineglass forgotten halfway to his lips, watching Lily's hands with an expression somewhere between shock and disbelief. This was not what he had expected when he had casually commanded a server to entertain his guests. In the kitchen doorway, Mike stood open-mouthed, while Tony and Rebecca exchanged wide-eyed glances. They had worked alongside Lily for years without knowing, without even suspecting that their quiet co-worker possessed this extraordinary gift. The professional pianist who had been dismissed earlier would have struggled with this piece, yet here was Lily playing it with the confidence and skill of a concert performer. As her hands conquered the treacherous jumps across octaves that made La Campanella notorious even among accomplished pianists, Lily felt something unlock inside her chest. A door flung wide open after being shut for too long. The technical challenge forced her to focus completely, leaving no room for self-doubt or hesitation. Each successful run, each perfectly executed trill, reminded her body of what it knew how to do, what it had been trained to do through thousands of hours of practice. The piece demanded everything from a pianist: speed, Accuracy, strength, and delicacy all at once. Her years away from serious practice should have made it impossible, yet something deeper than conscious thought was guiding her fingers now. The music had always been there, waiting patiently beneath the surface of her everyday life. Who is she? A woman in a blue evening dress whispered to her companion, loud enough for others to hear. Not just a waitress? Apparently, came the reply. Lily registered these comments dimly through the fog of her concentration. The room around her had receded to background awareness as she navigated the most challenging passages of the piece. This wasn't just muscle memory anymore. This was active, focused performance. Her body remembered the proper posture, the slight lean into the keys during demanding sections, the precise pedal technique needed for the bell-like clarity that gave the piece its name. As she played, images flashed through her mind. The university practice rooms where she had spent countless late nights perfecting this very piece. Her piano professor standing over her, demanding more precision, more expression. This isn't just a technical exercise, he would say. Liszt is showing off, yes, but he's also telling a story. Tell the story. The story Lily told now was her own, of buried talents and rediscovered passion, of dreams deferred but not abandoned. Each sparkling run of notes spoke of possibility. Each resolute chord progression declared resilience. She glanced up briefly and caught Reed's eye. The powerful businessman was watching her with an intensity that would have been unnerving if she weren't so completely immersed in the music. There was confusion in his gaze, as if he were trying to reconcile the server who had poured his wine with the virtuoso, now commanding the room's attention. Good, Lily thought, returning her focus to the keyboard. Let him be confused. Let him wonder. Let all of them wonder about the snap judgments they made every day, the people they looked through rather than at, the talents and dreams hidden beneath uniforms and name tags. As she approached the final section of La Campanella, Lily allowed herself to play with even more abandon. Her technique wasn't perfect, not after nearly 2 years away from serious practice, but what she might have lost in precision, she made up for in emotional conviction. The joy of playing again, of speaking this wordless language that had once been the center of her life, infused every note. The final chords resounded through the room, hanging in the air for a breathless moment before fading. Silence followed, complete stunned silence. Then someone gasped. Someone else whispered an exclamation, and suddenly the room erupted in spontaneous applause. The sound startled Lily back to full awareness of her surroundings. She had almost forgotten where she was, who she was playing for. Now reality came rushing back. The private dining room, Reed's dinner party, her job, her abandoned uniform duties. She half rose from the bench, uncertain what to do next, caught between worlds. Wait, Reed called out, his voice cutting through the applause. He stood up, napkin tossed aside, and approached the piano. The room quieted immediately. For a terrible moment, Lily thought he might be angry, might see her display of talent as some kind of challenge to his authority, an upstaging of his carefully orchestrated evening. His expression was unreadable as he stopped beside the piano. "You're not just a little familiar with the piano, are you?" he asked, his voice lower now, meant only for her, though in the hushed room everyone could hear. Lily straightened her back, meeting his gaze directly. "No, sir. Where did you study?" "State University. Piano performance major." "I was 1 semester away from graduating when..." She stopped herself. This man hadn't earned her life story. "Family circumstances changed my plans." Reed studied her face with new interest. "That piece you just played, that was Liszt?" "Yes, La Campanella, one of his Paganini etudes." A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed Reed's face. "One of the most difficult piano pieces ever written, if I'm not mistaken." Lily blinked in surprise. So he did know something about classical music after all. "My mother was a pianist," Reed explained, catching her expression. "Not professional, but serious. She made sure I knew the repertoire, even if I never had the talent myself." A shadow passed over his face, some old memory that darkened his eyes momentarily before he continued. "Why are you working here, pouring coffee, when you can play like that?" The question hung in the air between them, too direct to deflect, too personal to answer easily. Lily was acutely aware of the entire room watching this exchange, of her co-workers hovering by the kitchen door, of Reed's guests straining to hear her response. "Life doesn't always go as planned," she said finally. Sometimes you have to put dreams on hold to handle what's in front of you. And what was in front of you? Reed pressed. Lily hesitated. She didn't owe him this information. Didn't owe him anything, but something in his manner had shifted. The arrogance was still there, but tempered now with what seemed like genuine curiosity. My grandmother needed full-time care, she said simply. The money for my final semester went to her assisted living facility instead. The money for grad school applications became grocery money and rent. Reed's expression was thoughtful as he processed this. And now? Now I work double shifts at the Bellamy, take online classes when I can afford them, and visit my grandmother on Sundays. The piano in my apartment mostly collects dust. She hadn't meant to say so much, especially not to this man, but the words had come out anyway, carried on the wave of emotion that playing had released. Reed turned to survey the room, seeming to remember suddenly that they had an audience. His guests were watching with rapt attention, their expressions ranging from moved to uncomfortable. This wasn't the entertainment they had expected with their soufflés and coffee. "Play something else," Reed said, turning back to her. It wasn't exactly a request, but it wasn't quite the imperious command of earlier either. There was something different in his tone now. Still entitled, still accustomed to having his wishes granted, but with a new undercurrent of respect. Lily considered refusing. She had already given this room more of herself than she had intended. But the truth was, she didn't want to stop playing. After nearly 2 years of silence, the music was flowing through her again, washing away the accumulated dust of doubt and resignation. She nodded once and turned back to the piano. This time she chose Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, darkly passionate, thunderously powerful in places, achingly vulnerable in others. A piece that matched her current storm of emotions. As the opening chords reverberated through the room, Lily was aware of Reed returning to his seat, of the waitstaff slipping back to their duties, of the kitchen door swinging quietly as the chef peered out to locate the source of the extraordinary music that had brought his restaurant operations to a standstill. But mostly, she was aware of the music itself, the way it filled not just the room but the empty spaces inside her. Spaces that had been hollow for too long. She played with her eyes closed now, surrendering completely to the piece. Rachmaninoff demanded no less. His music required not just technical skill but emotional courage, the willingness to express both power and vulnerability through the same hands, sometimes in the same measure. When she finished, the silence lasted only a moment before the room again burst into applause, more enthusiastic this time, less shocked and more appreciative. Lily opened her eyes to see that several people had risen to their feet, and there, among the standing guests, was a slender woman with silver-streaked dark hair who was watching Lily with an expression of intense interest. Unlike the others, she wasn't applauding. Instead, she had taken out a small notebook and was writing something down, her eyes darting occasionally back to Lily with a calculating look that somehow felt more significant than all the applause combined. The applause eventually faded, but something in the room had permanently changed. Lily sat at the piano, hands resting lightly on her lap, feeling strangely calm despite being the center of attention, in a way she had never been at the Bellamy before. For 3 years she had been background, efficient, invisible, necessary, but unnoticed. Now 22 pairs of eyes were fixed on her with expressions ranging from amazement to curiosity to calculation. Reed's dinner guests began talking all at once, their voices overlapping in a buzz of excitement. Several pulled out phones, no doubt searching for information about the pieces she had played. A few leaned toward Reed himself, asking questions she couldn't quite hear. The businessman nodded, his expression thoughtful in a way she hadn't seen before. Lily, Mike appeared at her side, his earlier worry replaced by bewilderment. "I had no idea you could play like that. Why didn't you ever say anything?" She gave him a small, tired smile. It never seemed relevant to refilling water glasses. "But you're incredible. That was..." He gestured helplessly, searching for words. "Thank you," she said simply. She stood up from the bench, suddenly aware of how out of place she felt in her server's uniform after what had just happened. "I should probably get back to..." "No." Mike shook his head firmly. "Take a break. 10 minutes at least. The kitchen staff is talking about nothing else. They all want to meet you." Before Lily could respond, the silver-haired woman she had noticed earlier approached them. Up close, Lily could see she was in her early 60s, with intelligent eyes and an air of unmistakable authority despite her slim build. "Excuse me," the woman said, extending her hand to Lily. "I'm Catherine Bailey. I'd like to speak with you if you have a moment." Mike's eyes widened slightly at the name and he quickly backed away. "Take all the time you need, Lily," he said before returning to oversee the rest of the staff. Lily shook the woman's hand, noting the firm grip and direct gaze. "I'm Lily Harris," she replied, uncertain why this particular guest wanted to talk to her but instinctively straightening her posture. "I know who you are now," Catherine said with a small smile, "though I certainly didn't when I arrived this evening." She glanced around, then gestured to a quiet corner away from the main table. "Shall we?" Curious, Lily followed her to the relative privacy of the corner. Catherine turned to face her, studying her with such intensity that Lily had to resist the urge to check if her uniform was properly buttoned. "I'm the director of the City Philharmonic," Catherine said without preamble, "and I've just heard one of the most surprising performances of my career." Lily's heart skipped a beat. The City Philharmonic was the most prestigious musical organization in the region. Their annual concert series drew world-class soloists and conductors, and their director was standing in front of her, in the middle of her waitressing shift, looking at her like she was a puzzle to be solved. "Thank you," Lily managed to say, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's been a while since I've played seriously." "That much is clear," Catherine replied, but there was no criticism in her tone, only curiosity. "Your technique needs refining after your time away from practice, but your musicality—" She paused, shaking her head slightly. "That cannot be taught. That comes from somewhere deeper." Lily didn't know how to respond. This conversation felt surreal, like something from the dreams she used to have before pragmatism had worn them away. "I'd like you to audition for us," Catherine continued, reaching into her purse and extracting a business card. "We have an opening for a featured soloist in our spring showcase. It's usually reserved for young artists at the beginning of their careers, to give them performance experience with a professional orchestra." Lily stared at the card being offered to her, unable to move. "I don't understand," she said finally. "You just heard me play for the first time. I haven't touched a piano regularly in almost 2 years. I didn't even finish my degree." Catherine's expression softened slightly. "Music isn't about credentials, Ms. Harris, it's about connection. What you just did in this room, connecting with that piano, with those pieces, with this audience, that's what matters." She pressed the card into Lily's hand. "Call my office tomorrow. We'll set up a proper audition with the selection committee." "I work double shifts most days," Lily said, the practical concerns of her life reasserting themselves, "and I can't practice properly on my old upright. It hasn't been tuned in years." "We'll work around your schedule," Catherine assured her, "and our rehearsal spaces are available to audition candidates. You'll have access to a concert grant for practice." Before Lily could come up with another objection, they were interrupted by Maxwell Reed, who approached with 2 glasses of champagne, offering one to each of them. "I see you've met our hidden talent, Catherine," he said, his earlier condescension replaced by something that almost resembled respect. "Indeed," Catherine replied, accepting the champagne. "I was just inviting Ms. Harris to audition for our spring showcase." Reed raised an eyebrow, looking at Lily with new interest. "Is that so? Well, she certainly deserves the opportunity after that performance." He sipped his champagne, then added, "I wasn't aware you knew each other." "We don't," Catherine said simply. "Or we didn't until tonight." "Sometimes talent introduces itself in unexpected places." Reed nodded slowly, his gaze shifting between the 2 women. Something seemed to be turning over in his mind. "The Pinnacle's Cultural Center will need programming," he said finally. "Local talent should be part of that." "I'm sure it should," Catherine replied, her tone suddenly cooler. "Though I hope your development plans have changed since our last conversation. The historic theater district has value beyond its real estate potential." The tension between them was subtle but unmistakable. Lily glanced from one to the other, realizing there was history here she knew nothing about. "Perhaps we should discuss that another time," Reed said smoothly, turning his attention back to Lily. "Ms. Harris, I owe you an apology for earlier. I made assumptions that were clearly incorrect." The admission seemed to cost him some effort, but appeared genuine nonetheless. Lily nodded her acceptance, still somewhat dazed by the rapid turn of events. "If you'll excuse us," Catherine said, placing her still full champagne glass on a nearby table. "I'd like to finish my conversation with Ms. Harris." Reed inclined his head in acknowledgement and returned to his guests, leaving Lily alone again with the orchestra director. "He's not as bad as his reputation suggests," Catherine commented, watching Reed rejoin his table, "just privileged enough to have never had his assumptions seriously challenged." She turned back to Lily. "Now where were we?" "Ah yes, your audition." For the next few minutes, Catherine outlined what the audition would entail, what pieces Lily should prepare, and what opportunity it represented. As Lily listened, a cautious hope began to build inside her, a feeling she had deliberately suppressed for so long that it was almost painful in its intensity. "I should let you get back to work," Catherine said finally, noticing Mike hovering nearby. "But call me tomorrow. This isn't charity, Ms. Harris, this is recognition of genuine talent." After Catherine returned to the table, the remainder of the evening passed in a blur. Lily went through the motions of her job, clearing plates, refilling coffee cups, bringing the check when requested, but her mind was elsewhere, alternating between disbelief and tentative excitement. As the dinner party prepared to leave, Reed approached her one last time. The other guests were putting on coats and gathering belongings, but he lingered behind, waiting until they had a moment of relative privacy. "I meant what I said earlier," he told her, his voice lower than it had been all evening. "I misjudged you and I apologize." "Thank you," Lily said simply. Reed seemed to struggle with what to say next, uncharacteristically hesitant. "My mother was a talented pianist," he said finally, "but she never had the chance to pursue it professionally. Family expectations, social pressure, it was a different time." He paused, looking at Lily with an expression she couldn't quite read. "She would have appreciated your performance tonight." "Very much." Before Lily could respond, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card of his own. "If there's anything you need, financially or otherwise, to prepare for that audition, call my office. My assistant will put you through directly." Lily took the card, surprised by the unexpected gesture. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Reed considered her question seriously. "Let's just say tonight was enlightening. It made me reconsider some things." He glanced toward the piano, then back to her. "Talent like yours shouldn't be wasted serving coffee, no matter what circumstances led you here." After the last guest had departed and the restaurant was being cleaned for the night, Mike found Lily in the break room, staring at the two business cards in her hands, Catherine's elegant cream-colored card and Reed's sleek black one. "So," he said, sitting across from her with a cup of coffee, "I'm guessing tomorrow might be your last day here?" Lily looked up, startled. "What? No, I can't just quit. I need this job. My grandmother's care, my rent." Mike held up a hand to stop her. "I overheard some of what happened. That woman is Catherine Bailey, the Catherine Bailey from the Philharmonic. And Reed was actually being nice to you. Things are changing, Lily." "Maybe," she admitted, "but an audition isn't a job, and even if I get it, one performance won't pay the bills." "True," Mike conceded, "but it's a start. A foot in the door. And I've never seen anyone play like you did tonight." He smiled at her, a genuine smile without the usual stress that came with managing the restaurant. "Just promise you'll let us know when your first concert is. The whole staff will want tickets." 3 months later, Lily stood backstage at the Grand Concert Hall, dressed not in a server's uniform but in a simple black evening gown. Through the curtain she could hear the murmur of the audience as they filled the auditorium. Her hands trembled slightly as she flexed them, preparing for her performance. 5 minutes, Ms. Harris," the stage manager informed her quietly. Lily nodded, taking a deep breath. The past 12 weeks had been a whirlwind. Intensive practice sessions, coaching with the Philharmonic's pianist, press interviews about her unusual discovery. Reed had made good on his offer of assistance, establishing a scholarship fund for musicians facing fin,